As college students, we each fall into our own unique routines that are comprised of the smaller lifestyle decisions we make throughout our day that ultimately comprise of these routines. An example of this could be whether or not we decide to wake up early in the morning and take advantage of that extra time. Maybe that's by going over slides for classes, maybe that's by doing laundry. Or on the opposite side, maybe you can choose to just sleep in and take advantage of the extra sleep time. And you know what? Both are perfectly, totally understandable. But another common lifestyle decision that we make is the foods we eat, and ultimately that's what fuels our bodies throughout the day. Some people tend to be a little bit more carefree when it comes to this. Some people on the opposite side of that spectrum can choose to be a lot more strict with that. They tend to track their macronutrients, they tend to portion out everything in very specific quantities. Some people even go as far as to track the amount of water they drink throughout the day. But the cool thing about diets is that ultimately you can make them work to adapt to your current goals and lifestyle and ultimately try to garner the results you intend to get. But some diets, especially in this day and age, go a bit too far. Even the word diet just carries around this very negative connotation, and I think social media is what's to blame for that. More specifically, these celebrities and influencers, as everyone nowadays just want to get that ideal slim look or, you know, to be fit per se. And some people think, going about that is by to do a detox tea diet. Maybe that's by doing a water fast. Basically, the word diet to a lot of people just means restriction. And a lot more recently, that tends to be carbohydrates. Somehow carbohydrates have had this very big negative reputation in the general public, which people seem to believe that cutting out all types of carbohydrates can make them just burn a lot of visceral fat and achieve that slim look. But is that really the case? Is cutting out all carbohydrates really the key to get that slim look? Well, let's find out in today's video. Meet Adam. Adam is currently a freshman here at UMass who is hoping to switch into the computer science major while also following the pre-med track. Adam is also doing some EMT work on the side and is currently serving on the leadership board for the Muslim Student Association. And as you're going to see in this next clip right here, Adam also takes his workouts here pretty seriously. Working out typically 5 to 6 days a week, Adam follows a push-pull leg day split while doing some calisthenics works here and there as well. And what does Adam usually eat to typically fuel these workouts? Take a guess. Well, if you guessed right, Adam does follow a high protein, low carbohydrate diet, as you can see right here, just having some lean protein with some cauliflower on the sides. Adam's diet is pretty strict, usually little to absolutely no cheat days, no soda, no juice, typically just water to hydrate himself. And we can see another example of a typical meal for Adam is just some dark leafy greens on the side with some broccoli, and again we see that lean protein source. But surely not everyone has to follow such a rigid diet to put on some muscle and just be fit, right? After all, our brain and central nervous system prefers glucose, aka carbs, over any other energy source in our body. So what gives? Is following such a rigid diet really the only way to build and maintain muscle mass? Well, let's see what the research and what Adam has to say about this.
So I don't think you necessarily need to maintain my diet or go about my diet to gain muscle mass. Rather, it's actually more beneficial to go on a bulk, high carb, high protein diet. That way you actually gain muscle mass faster because carbohydrates are what allow you to gain greater explosiveness and durability in your workouts.
Well, Adam does have one thing right. Following a high protein diet will definitely lead to more overall lean body mass. In this research analysis paper, looking at acute meal changes over time between different groups, it's been concluded that usually an intake between 1.6 grams to 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day is the optimal protein range. But more longitudinal studies definitely need to be done, as well everyone's body is different. But this does support the ongoing literature that protein is optimal for lean body mass building and even fat loss. Specifically, in this blind randomized trial here, two groups were pitted against each other, one being recreationally active adults and one being overweight adults. Both were given the same weight loss diet, the same exercise regimen consisting of aerobic and weight-bearing exercise. The only difference, however, is that the protein shake given to each group were different. One group had a protein shake that pushed their total intake to 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram body weight, versus the other group who had double the amount of protein at 2.4 grams of protein per kilogram body weight. After 4 weeks, both groups lost around the same amount of fat mass. However, the group who was given the higher quantity protein shake did acquire more lean mass, thus showcasing that a high protein intake can indeed induce lean body mass gain as well as fat loss. So yes, a high protein intake is optimal to build muscle, but again, to completely cut off a large portion of carbs in the process is, well, certainly extreme. You're essentially depriving your body of its main energy source, and in fact, even when we use fat for our energy, our body still needs to use a small amount of glucose in order to break down that fat. Just to be frank, a high protein, low carb diet is just not sustainable for the long term. I think there's only so much enjoyment one can get from just eating chicken and veggies every day for dinner. But that being said, other than just enjoyment of meals, what are the other possible side effects of following such a rigid diet? Let's see what the literature and Adam has to say about this.
Occasionally, I do get fatigued during my workouts, or I don't have enough energy to keep going, and that's the part of the issues that you can get with a low carb diet, high protein, because you're not supplementing your body with so much energy because you're focused on cutting down the fat that you have and using your fat storages as energy. And here and there you may get headaches if you're not drinking enough water or supplementing your body with enough carbohydrates. So it's important not to go too low, but you need to find the right balance that gives you enough energy to complete your workouts and give you and allow you to manage your other tasks and duties throughout the day.
Feeling fatigued and having some headaches are certainly drawbacks to this diet. They are certainly not the only ones, as showcased here by this article from the Mayo Clinic. Both constipation, muscle cramps, and even mineral deficiency are all drawbacks from this diet. And in this next article here, we can see the possible implications for having a protein intake higher than the recommended dietary allowance. Specifically, what stands out to me here is impaired kidney function, as our body just simply needs to work really hard to get all that urea out of our body due to the increased protein intake. What's even more scary is this research article right here that looked at a total of 32 studies that were associated with high protein intakes, and well, the results were not pretty. The adverse effects associated with a long-term high protein intake were as follows: disorders of bone and calcium homeostasis, disorders of renal function, increased cancer risk, disorders of liver function, and well, the list actually goes on further in this table right here. This table showcases that many people who had a high protein intake suffered from hypercalciuria, which is basically excess calcium in the urine, which is bad because our body, just like our blood glucose, needs to keep our calcium levels at a very tight, narrow range. This next part of the table highlights again what we saw in the abstract, that being impaired renal function due to the overworkings of the kidneys, as well as an increase in cancer risk, as meat intake is positively associated with cancer risk. It's also important to note here that, well, if we're not careful with what meat sources we choose and how we get our protein, we will experience adverse health effects. For instance, it's better to just choose leaner meat options and limit things like red meat. For instance, red meats are known to have more saturated fat content than leaner meat options. Thus, it's a good idea to limit red meat intake when you can. There are simply a lot of adverse health effects for a high protein, low carbohydrate diet. So, what's the timeline for this diet looking like? Clearly, we wouldn't want this diet to overstay its welcome, and, well, by Adam's answer and by the research, there actually is an optimal time window to follow this diet for.
So my cutting phase lasts from February till May, so about a 4-month period where I decrease my carbohydrate intake. Once we reach the summer, I increase the carbohydrate intake at a maintenance level to maintain my body weight. And then once we reach the fall, then that's when I begin my bulking phase, and I repeat this cycle over and over every year.
Adam's response actually aligns with the research once again. Following a high protein, low carb diet for periods shorter than 6 months has actually been shown to be effective for weight loss, as well as a reduction in blood pressure and triglycerides. But as we see here highlighted again, subjects who followed the high protein, low carb diet were subjected to the symptoms aforementioned earlier in this video, which again, all these effects aren't desirable at all. Furthermore, this research article goes on to state that following a high protein, low carb diet for periods longer than 12 months have shown not to be very effective, specifically when compared to subjects who followed a conventional diet with just a slight caloric restriction. There was basically no significant difference in weight loss between the two groups. So as long as one gets their sources of carbs and proteins from whole sources and complex carbs, instead of things like fried chicken, ice cream, soda, fries, well, the list can go on. Basically, they can expect to have a reduction in weight loss, and you don't have to resort to eating broccoli and chicken every day for dinner. So what does this all mean? Well, I think there's a couple of key takeaways here. For one, if you do want to pack on some muscle and become, well, slim, then yes, a high protein, low carb diet is certainly one way of doing that, but don't expect it to be sunshine and rainbows along the way. I think the bigger takeaway from this video is that, well, you don't need to follow a high protein, low carb diet for your whole life. Yes, aesthetics and just being fit are nice to have, and again, with social media, it's something we all seem to desire, but you can still be fit and be slim in all these desirable terms while following a typical diet. Again, you just need to be careful of what you eat, and that's not saying we can't indulge in a cookie or cake here and there, but you know, everything in moderation is ultimately what we should be going for. Overall, I think diets are something we should have fun with again. I think it's cool that for me, I personally prefer to have my oatmeal with blueberries versus my other friends who prefer to just have an egg and cheese omelet. Ultimately, the foods we choose to fuel our bodies with, we should have a healthy relationship with that food. Again, having that urge to get that summer body ready while following a high protein, low carb diet is, well, understandable, but this shouldn't come at the expense of your relationship with how you view your food and, well, your overall eating experience in general. After all, we're only here for a short period of time, so you might as well just try to make the most of that time and enjoy it to the best you can.